Pet Sematary is directed by Kevin Kolsch and Devin Widmeyer, and this film is yet again another adaptation of the Stephen King novel of the same name. And this film follows the Creed family as they move to their new home in Ludlow, where they discover the burial grounds of the Pet Sematary, a site where local children go to bury their deceased pets. I remember seeing the original Pet Sematary when I was younger, and I've seen it a few times since then, and from what I remember, it is a completely serviceable film. So when it came to the proposition of a remake, I was pretty open to that idea, and I was fortunate enough to catch a screening of this film at the world premiere at the 2019 South by Southwest Film Festival, something that I will be talking more about on my channel in the coming weeks. But I was really looking forward to seeing this film, especially so because we kind of find ourselves in this Stephen King assance with movies like Gerald's Game, 1922, and especially so with It. Not to say that they've all been home runs, but nonetheless, I was very excited to see what could be done with the concept of this very dark story of the Pet Sematary. And with this film, there are some elements that I enjoy. For one, I think the special effects work that is done with the makeup in this film is really second to none. And if you are at all familiar with the story, you probably remember the character of Rachel's sister, who I think looks absolutely terrific in this film. In fact, I think the character of Rachel herself is probably the most interesting aspect of this film. She has this dark past that she's trying to deal with, and she was easily the character that I was most drawn to in this film. Not to mention that the actress that portrays this character, Amy Seimetz, does such a terrific job. And I'd say for the most part, the performances all around were pretty excellent. Jason Clarke, who has consistently delivered really strong performances, does so again in this film. I was also very impressed with the work of Jette Lawrence, who portrays the young girl in this film. I thought she was definitely the standout of this movie. Furthermore, I really loved what this film does in regards to the story's ending. Now, I'm not too familiar with the original source material, so I can't really tell you whether or not it is accurate to the book that this film is based off of, but I thought it was really effective, pretty unsettling, and as a result was by far my favorite aspect of this film. And I think the things that this movie does opt to change end up being some of the highlights of this film. For one, this is a surprisingly funny movie. There are plenty of moments of levity throughout this film, especially so in moments that you probably wouldn't typically expect. Now, for some, I think that this might detract from the suspense that this film had been working so hard to build up, but for myself personally, I actually would have wished that they leaned into this a bit more. I think the opportunity is there for a dark comedy of sorts, and if they were attempting to distance themselves from the original film, I believe that this would have been a great way to do just that. And that does bring me to my biggest issue with Pet Sematary, is that this film doesn't really do much to distance itself from the 1989 film, and for the most part, most horror films in general, I found Pet Sematary to be incredibly bland, unfortunately. At no point throughout most of this film did I think that they made any real attempt to distinguish itself or to be different or memorable. And I found that to be especially true with the very poor attempts at horror in this film, which I found to be by far the biggest sin of this movie. Because nearly every single scare in this film is set up and executed in the same way. Typically, a character hears something making noise in the distance, they go to investigate only to find that there is nothing wrong, and just when they relax and think that everything is okay, something pops out behind the corner and ends up scaring them, and you hear this loud noise and a jump scare ripples throughout the audience. And more oftentimes than not, that is what this film consists of, is very poorly executed jump scares. So much so that there is not a single scare in this movie that I found to be effective, and I genuinely mean that. And not only can this film not even execute the most basic of horror scares with a jump scare, but I think this movie also does a pretty poor job at effectively delivering some very creepy or unsettling imagery more oftentimes than not. Which I think is why, after seeing this film, I was kind of hoping that it would have leaned more heavily into its comedic tones, because it was failing so hard on the horror front. And for the most part, this film doesn't have too many surprises, and not just with its scares, but with the narrative either, except with, as I said, the ending of this film is a bit altered. But generally, I feel like this film, for the most part, is pretty familiar with the original incarnation. And of course, I recognize that this is the adaptation of a novel, so I understand that you can't really alter too much as far as the plot is concerned, which I think is why I was hoping that this film would distinguish itself with either its tone or its exceptional scares, which, as I've mentioned previously, this movie doesn't really have that. And instead, for the most part, this film comes off as pretty inexcusably bland. Like I said, I really wanted to like this film, but I think that there could have been a lot more improvements made, even with the most basic job of a horror film, which is the horror. And the film didn't even come close to being frightening for myself, because I've seen everything that this movie throws at the audience in a dozen of other much better horror films. And from what I've gathered so far from those who were at the world premiere, I am vastly in the minority of enjoying this film. This movie has what I believe to be a 100% on Rotten Tomatoes at this time, and for the life of me, I can't fully understand why. If you enjoyed the film, I totally and completely am happy for you. For myself personally, I found this movie to be one of the most disappointing films that I saw during my time at South by Southwest. And speaking of South by Southwest Film Festival, if you are interested, make sure you keep your eyes on my channel, because I will be rolling out some videos that covered my time during this festival and some of the best movies that I saw throughout this past week. So did you guys see Pet Sematary? What did you think about it? Leave your thoughts and opinions down below. And as always, guys, thank you so much for watching today. I hope you liked today's video. And if you did, you can click on the link down below and subscribe to my channel to see more movie reviews and movie related things. Guys, thank you so much for watching, and see you next time.